So in one instance, you're looking at means, initial means, and in the other instance, you're looking at cross products, correlations. Basically, you're looking at cross products, where you've taken out some of the variation over the variance. So one is a discussion about second moments, and the other is a discussion about first moments. So although I didn't ask that question explicitly for what you did last week, implicitly it was there. I just forgot to put it in as a question. I then had you do some simple regressions. One of them had to do with global temperature and I think U.S. GDP. And I had to do it one way with GDP, or the level of GDP, or the growth of GDP on the left and temperature on the right, and then again the other way around. And for each of them, you were supposed to come up with an explanation, a theory. And I don't know if I encourage you to make your theory as preposterous as possible, but I meant to. And so what I was hoping was that you would come up with all kinds of, among all the people who did the assignment, everybody would have done GDP on the left and temperature on the right, and maybe out of the 40 or 32 or 4 students that are in here, I would have come up with 15 or 20 different explanations of that, theories about that relationship. And then have you run the regression the other way around and come up with theories. And we're so accustomed to thinking about cause and effect that in your theories, even inadvertently, you came up with cause and effect. So although you all ran a regression with GDP on the left and temperature on the right, you had a whole bunch of different explanations that were all predicated on your notion of cause and effect. And they were all different. So what does that say? And then when you turn the regression around, you came up with a completely different theory about GDP and temperature. And in reference to that particular statement of the regression problem, there were at least 15 different theories about why the model was switched around. And then I had to do the same thing with violent crime and the consumption of wine. If we all drink more wine, we'll be safer. How's that for a preposterous interpretation of what's in the data? Pretty good, huh? As good as any that you guys came up with. So why did I do that? And then at the end, I asked you about the scientific method. Why? Why bother? What did you get out of that exercise?
One of the things that I got out of it was exploring biases. You're just thinking about, and do I have a prejudiced opinion about the data and the interpretation of it?
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Also maybe make us
Frank,
aware.
right? Got it. You're not one of the Franks?
I'm not one of the Franks. Home.
Home. Okay, great. Sorry.
Maybe make us aware.
That's even worse than sauce, right?
Yes.
Instead of he was mispronouncing home.
Yes, he was.
I even had the wrong name.
He did.
Okay.
I forget the question.
Why did I have you do those?
Oh, right. To make us maybe aware of somebody else's interpretation, or maybe even your own, and just to be aware that what seemingly is a causation situation might not necessarily be that, flip it around, and now one is independent, the other is independent, but easily they can be misconstrued as a causation relationship where there is not.
Or, let me see if I can restate it a little bit. Okay. When you did those exercises for any one of the 4 regressions, amongst the 32 or so, there were 10 or 15 different structural models meant to explain the empirical finding. Right? But in the end, the statistical model couldn't discriminate between the structural explanations. So a body of data may be consistent with many different theoretical models. Yeah. Your friend. A friend.
One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting is that in the regression, we regardless of which variable is dependent or independent, R squared is the same.
That's an algebraic.
It's just an algebraic thing, but it kind of speaks to that point that
Yeah.
if you look at your regression and you say, if you're just looking at what fits best,
Yeah.
either one will get you the same.
Well, I think that's where the scientific method comes in with all this. Is the data can support or not support.
Actually, I'm glad you said that.
Support.
Repeat the first part.
So that's where the scientific method comes in. This issue.
The first part of the next sentence. The data can
Either support or not support association, but your idea has to come from past literature. This whole method, when you build on what's out there in the past. You develop, your idea. Comes to your question, you develop your idea, your hypothesis, and you can test whether the data supports that or doesn't support it, but it doesn't actually go towards whether the idea is actually right.
We go to H.
Why the cringe?
Why the cringe? What happened yesterday in Switzerland? Yesterday or today?
Okay.
Okay. You guys are so business oriented that we lost track of the important things in life. Yeah, they fired up the Large Hadron Collider. And
No worries about black holes.
right. Well, at least one guy is worried about black holes. We're all still here, so I guess they didn't make any yesterday. Actually, the black hole is supposed to be spawned. They anticipate that at the end of about 12 months of working with the collider, that they'll be in a position where they're ready to fire protons at each other. And it's when the protons hit each other that they think they'll create little black holes. So we don't have to worry for another year. So make the most of the next 12 months. So what are some of the things, in layman's terms, what do they hope to accomplish with the LHC? The Large Hadron Collider.
God particle.
What?
Higgs boson God particle.
Or put another way,
By model.
they are hoping that they can disprove the underpinnings of string theory. They can disprove things like supersymmetry. They don't ever talk about proving that string theory is right. They talk about being able to prove that it's wrong, or that supersymmetry is wrong. So the point of what I was having you do for last week was to understand clearly that you can't prove on the basis of the statistical evidence that you were given that your theory about violent crime and wine is correct. Your data doesn't support your theory about the association between violent crime and wine. The best that you can hope for is that you can disprove what you thought was the explanation for the connection between violent crime and wine. That's what you can only disprove propositions. You can't find support for them. You can't prove them to be correct. And you certainly are not the first ones to have stated things that way. I've been here for many years. I've been on many promotion and tenure committees, and so I've had to read a lot of papers out of the other business disciplines, and I cringe when I read some of them. Well, this is our proposition, and we found support for the null hypothesis. Saying things like that makes my skin crawl. And you can't find support for your null hypothesis. You can reject it and say that that was clearly wrong, or at least we're with 95% confidence. You can say that that's wrong, but you can never prove that it's right.